Okay, I'm seeing people are getting let in now. Welcome everybody to another Toronto Home Energy Network webinar. We're really excited to have you guys here tonight. The topic of tonight is AC or heat pump. What are the trade-offs? What are the things you need to consider when you're deciding between these two systems? I'm really excited to dive into this for two reasons. One reason is we did a bunch of tabling at the National Home Show this year, and almost every other question we got was, "Hey, I'm thinking about adding cooling. My AC is old. Should I get a heat pump? Should I get an AC? Which way should we go?" And that was actually the inspiration for calling up Drew for another webinar. It's like, people are thinking about this. Let's really get into the weeds and talk about the pros and cons and what people need to think about. And maybe some of the attendees here are people we met at the National Home Show. So if that's you, that would be great. I was lucky to see Julia point at your partner there. That was fantastic. I'm like, I can only see two other screens, but I did see you point at your partner. That's so good. So yeah, a few people here from that. And the second reason is we're talking about cooling. Our previous webinars have been mostly about heating, and that means that it's almost summer, which is really nice. So that's another reason I'm excited to talk about this webinar. So as you join, you're going to see a poll pop up there that's just going to be talking about um, some aspects of your cooling, and if you're interested in heat pump parties, which I'll get into the details of that if you haven't heard of those before. But it would be really awesome if you could fill out that poll. And then in the chat as well, it's always awesome if you just let us know if you're calling in from Toronto, what neighborhood you're calling in from. If you're not calling in from Toronto, where are you calling in from? We're always curious to see people that are attending. I know there might be one or two people from Waterloo that were emailing me about this webinar, so that's really, really nice there. And so with that, I'll start to move into the actual body of the webinar now. But before we do, again, because I love spring so much, I saw that there was this awesome tulip down the street, and so I thought I'd throw that up there. It's just we're we're moving in the right direction, guys. So that one popped up at the bottom of my street the other day, so I had to snap a photo. Okay. If you've attended one of our webinars before, we know we do a kind of the traditional land acknowledgement, and then I also like to have a future-oriented, a kind of action-oriented land acknowledgement in there as well. So for the traditional one, we acknowledge the land we're meeting on as the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And as far as the action-oriented aspect of the land acknowledgement, I want to point out this awesome toolkit. I write toolkits, I write guidebooks, so when I see a good toolkit, I love to share it. And the Montreal Indigenous Community Network has put out what they call this allyship toolkit, which has a bunch of reading lists and great resources and kind of the do's and don'ts of decolonialization. And they're all done very beautifully and have been printed and distributed really widely. So my colleague Jake is in the chat there, so I just encourage him to throw in the link there, and you guys can bookmark that one for later. I really recommend diving into some of the reading and resources that they've included in these allyship toolkits. So tonight's agenda, we're going through that intros and housekeeping now. Then our first segment, about 15 minutes or so, will be Drew Tozer. We're happy to have Drew back for another webinar, and we're going to get into the trade-offs, or Drew will get into the trade-offs and cost of installing and operating a traditional AC versus a heat pump. What are the things you need to think about, as well as a little bit of a heat pump 101, just to understand how they differ technologically from a traditional air conditioner. He's going to pass it over to me after that, and we'll get into some of like the homes as a system and words of advice from people who have installed heat pumps. We're connected with a lot of people that already had them, and they like to share their tidbits and advice with us, and we pass them on to you to make installing it, that nice, simple, stress-free kind of feeling of certainty, so you're not having to call back your installer and troubleshoot issues. We want it to go right the first time. So my presentation will get into some of those things that you can think about to make sure that happens. And then you're more than welcome to put in questions in the chat. Again, my colleague Jake's going to be in there and answering them as he can, or pinning them to get to revisit when we get to the open-ended Q&A at the end. So that's another way of saying that the presentations are going to go through, and then we'll get into the big question and answer towards the end. Of course, we'll share all the links and the recording tomorrow. So if you're watching this in the future, hello, nice to see you. And I know everyone couldn't make it, but that's okay. And the handout is always linked in the YouTube description as well. So if you miss a link or you want to go deeper into something, that'll be there. But Jake will be posting some links as we're going as well. So Drew's going to be our first speaker, author of a fantastic book on heat pumps, but a home comfort as well, just how to think about your home as a system, building science made very accessible, and is also co-founder of Foundry Heat Pumps, which does really excellent heat pump installations across Toronto and the GTA, and an energy advisor in a past life as well. So bringing a lot of technical knowledge to the table, which we really appreciate. And I'm Nathan. I'm the homeowner journey coordinator with Toronto Home Energy Network. That just means as you're going through your heat pump journey, I want to make sure you're connected with the right resources, the right people, and the right expertise to help you along that journey. And then also, if you want to share that and host a heat pump party in the future, I'd love to connect with you that way as well. So with that, Drew, I think I'm ready for you to take over sharing the screen, and we'll go into your presentation.
Great. I'll click all of the correct buttons, unmute
Okay.
myself.
I'm
Okay,
hearing you just fine.
and you can see it?
I can see it.
Okay, great. So for mine, I changed the title a little bit. I just, especially comparing one-way and two-way systems, one-way ACs and two-way ACs. I think that's going to be a big part of the conversation, and hopefully what you take away from this lesson today is just a two-way AC being another name for a heat pump. So here are just, I guess, for my piece, the quick questions that we're going to try to answer today. What is a two-way AC? Do heat pumps really struggle when it's really hot outside? Are they noisier? Are they more efficient? Comfort and savings, and a few sizing considerations in there. So I am going to start with a heat pumps 101. I think that's very important to just have the foundation of what technology we're talking about here. And where I like to start with that is that ACs don't add cold, right? There's no, it's a common misconception from homeowners because that's what it feels like is happening, that the system is adding cold air into the house. But in the same way, if you had, if the room was too light and you wanted to make it dark, you don't add darkness to the room. You make it dark by removing the light. So in the same way, an AC doesn't add cold. What it's doing is removing heat. So your AC system is taking in that hot air and actually taking some of that heat energy and expelling it outside. That's all an AC is doing, and that's true of standalone units, central ducted units, the portable units that you can move around. All air conditioners are just removing heat. They're just moving heat from one space to another. So what that feels like when you're inside, yes, the house feels colder because there is less heat in it. So a two-way AC, aka a heat pump, it's the exact same thing as an air conditioner. There's just a few extra pieces in it to let it switch directions. So in the summer, it's in cooling mode. It does the exact same thing. It's taking heat from inside the house, pushing it outside. The difference is that in the winter, it can switch directions into heating mode, and it's actually taking heat from the outside air and bringing it into the house to keep it warm. So that's sort of the basis of this is one-way air conditioner is what we always call air conditioners. A heat pump is just a two-way air conditioner. It's just an air conditioner that can switch directions. So the first question around, do heat pumps work when it's very hot outside? The answer is a simple yes, because in the summer, a heat pump operates exactly like a typical traditional air conditioner. It's a heat pump and cooling mode is an air conditioner, so it has no problems with hot temperatures, hot summer temperatures. So Common heat pumps. I listed the five, I would say the five categories, the five most common types of heat pumps on the left there. Ducted hybrid, so that would be a heat pump with a furnace backup heat source. A ducted fully electric, so that would be the indoor and the outdoor systems are fully electric. There's no combustion, there's no gas furnace, propane furnace, anything like that. Ductless, which are the wall mounted ones. And then air to water and ground source, we're just not going to cover in this conversation anyway. It's sort of important to know that there are other types of heat pumps that you'll hear about from time to time. So these two diagrams, this is just highlighting that a traditional furnace plus AC and on the left, and on the right, a traditional furnace and heat pump looks exactly the same from the inside. Like if you do a diagram of them, there's the outdoor unit, there's the fan, there's the gas heat exchanger, and there's a coil above it, the air conditioner coil or the heat pump coil. So the outdoor unit on the left, this is a heat pump. All generally heat pumps are these sort of what we call side discharge. The fans are blowing out the side instead of up like traditional air conditioners. So that's really all that looks different about heat pumps and air conditioners. And then on the right, this is a furnace with a heat pump on top of it. So instead of an AC coil in that sort of dark gray on top of the furnace, that's just a heat pump coil instead. So if you went into any house that had this, you'd be hard pressed to sort of tell the difference between this being a heat pump or it being an air conditioner. You can't really tell at first glance. So the fully electric is a similar idea. The diagram still looks similar. The difference is just that there's no combustion anymore. So the indoor unit looks still like a furnace. It's just in this big gray box on the left. There's no gas heat exchanger. There's just the fan, like in the furnace, and then there's the AC or the heat pump coil in that same piece. But again, if you just sort of stumbled into somebody's utility room and you saw this, you wouldn't at first glance really be able to tell whether it was a heat pump or a furnace. This is just to get you familiar with the idea that these are similar systems. They don't look that strange. It should be very familiar if you ever come across these. Ductless just means that there's the outdoor unit still, but there's no duct work in the house. So it's these wall-mounted units. Most of them look the same. This one is a company called Quilt. So it's actually that unit on the top right there with sort of the wood panel on the front. But it's the same idea where it's moving that heat or moving the heat and either heating the house or cooling the house by removing the heat with the fan that's in that ductless wall-mounted unit. So taking a step into specs, like what is the actual difference, the price, the efficiency, the noise. I think this is sort of the meat of what most people are interested in this conversation. The hard part in this conversation is that it all depends on the brand and the make and the model and the size. So there's no quick and easy answer about what's the price difference, is one more efficient, is one louder or quieter. Depends the quality of the air conditioner that you buy or currently own or would buy, and the quality and type of heat pump that you're considering comparing it to. So on the left, I just used York just because their website had a very simple the price range in dollars, dollar signs. So I skipped the single dollar one and I just went to the $2, the $3 signs or $4 signs as a sort of good, better, best options. Those three single stage just means that the system is going to turn on or off. It's a binary system. All it can do is turn on and provide that amount of cooling, or it turns off, right? Two stage, it means what it sounds like. It has that sort of the high setting and a low setting. And these speeds are the compressor speeds and not necessarily the sort of indoor fan speed that you're seeing on the furnace or the air handler. So this is actually how much cooling capacity the system can do. And then when you start getting into the best ACs, we start talking about variable capacity, so it can ramp up and ramp down, and there's a bigger range of cooling that it can output. Um, so essentially, all cold climate heat pumps are variable speed inverter driven compressors. So they all have this benefit of the variable as opposed to the single stage and two stage. That's important to know when we're sort of in the next piece that we talk about, or maybe the piece after that when we start talking about comfort. That makes a big difference, variable versus two versus single stage. Quilt, I just added zonal. That's not necessarily just for quilt, but for ductless heat pumps, I added zonal just with the understanding that you get separate control over all of the indoor units. So there's even extra control about the amount of heating and cooling, and all of those indoor units can ramp up and ramp down as needed. Efficiency wise, this is where it gets a little bit messy when we start talking about, is it more efficient? And especially when homeowners want to know about savings, because you might have an old air conditioner that's a 10 SEER or a 12 SEER. SEER is just a seasonal, it's essentially the efficiency of an air conditioner across the entire cooling season. So the S is for seasonal there. So higher is better. It just means that there's more cooling per electricity input into it. So whether a heat pump is more efficient, less efficient than an air conditioner, it's I would say that it is always more efficient than any old air conditioner that you have. I describe it as it is a new cold climate heat pump is going to be comparable to any new high efficiency, like excellent air conditioner, right? And that's what, when I went and pulled these numbers, the like 18 SEER, 20 SEER numbers for efficiency for those lines up with sort of what we see from most cold climate heat pumps, which is that 18, 19 SEER. And then ductless, basically all apples to apples, ductless will be more efficient than ducted systems. So Quilt looks much better in this table, but just know that that's sort of, Quilt is just the placeholder in this table for ductless heat pumps. And then noise is, I think, an especially important piece. And it's something that we don't really think about until the system's already installed, and especially in Toronto, where we are talking about smaller outdoor spaces, and the noise can be very important in those. So I included a few numbers at the bottom there for what decibels mean, right? Decibels is a log scale. So every time you increase by 10 decibels, it actually doubles the perceived loudness. So you can think of 10 decibels being twice as loud. So the difference between 50 and 60 is twice as loud. The difference between 60 and 70 is twice as loud. So 50 decibels is sort of a soft rainfall, moderate rainfall. 60 is sort of the amount of noise in a restaurant, or sort of a normal conversation, and 70 is a vacuum cleaner. And you can see that the cheaper air conditioners are louder than more expensive ones, and especially when you get into the very top end pieces. And it's the same with heat pumps, where the cheaper ones are noisier than more expensive ones. But there is certainly a crossover there where heat pumps are quieter than air conditioners in general. It's just sort of where you are within that band, the performance price band within those two categories. So why heat pumps? So this, actually, I'll take a step back here just for the efficiency piece. There's, when we talk about dollar savings, which is what people want to know about, there's two pieces to that. One is by switching from an air conditioner to a heat pump, am I going to save money? Right, that's the question. And there's two pieces. That one is in the summer, right, the direct comparison, and the second piece to that is in the winter. The problem is that most of our energy costs for heating and cooling are in the winter. We are in a heating dominated climates, right? We don't use nearly as much energy cooling our houses as heating our houses. So there will be savings when you go from an old air conditioner to a new heat pump, in the same way that there would be savings if you went from an old air conditioner to a new high quality air conditioner. But the difference between sort of high quality air conditioner and high quality heat pump, or even the cheaper heat pumps, it's not going to be that significant. If there are savings, it's going to come from the heating side. Um, the why heat pumps piece, there's sustainability. That's on the heating side benefits, energy independence, and fuel flexibility as well. Those are on the heating benefits side of either having a hybrid if you're just replacing the air conditioner with a heat pump, or if you decided to do a fully electric system at the same time, you don't get the fuel flexibility piece, but you get the energy independence and the sustainability. Huge savings has an asterisk beside it, which we'll get to. But I want to talk about comfort and, I mean, what the picture says, load matching. So load matching is the HVAC system's ability to provide the right amount of cooling that the house needs. So when, oh, next slide. When you have especially single stage equipment, all it can do is turn on and off. Nate Adams, who wrote the home comfort book, has my favorite analogy about this, which is you have a 10 gallon bucket of water, and your two options are either to dump that entire bucket on your head all at once of hot water, or it's to take the sort of 1.5, 2 gallons per minute steady stream warm shower instead. And we understand that the shower piece of that is going to be more comfortable than just the bucket of water, even though it is the same amount of water with the same amount of heat energy in it. And what that generally turns into in homes is comfort temperature differences between floors and between areas, based on what we call short cycling. So it's short cycling happens when you have single stage or two stage equipment, and it's basically that big bucket of water. And when the thermostat calls for cooling, all it can do is dump the whole bucket at once and to make the thermostat happy. When you talk about high end, like the variable speed air conditioners or heat pumps, we're talking about being able to have a much bigger band of cooling that you can provide. So it's for more hours of the year, you can provide the right amount of cooling that it needs, which is that steady stream of shower, keeping all of the rooms a similar temperature, the floors a similar temperature, and importantly for comfort, the surfaces similar temperatures. So this slide is about size. This is mostly a placeholder to remind me to talk to you about sizing considerations when you're looking at an air conditioner or a heat pump. This piece specifically is for sort of the sizes for an average house in Toronto, in Ontario, how much heating they would need, sort of in that orange and the blue, the size of common residential heat pumps, and then the size of sort of the average size of furnaces, that basically the size that furnaces possibly can come in. And so this is just to say that furnaces are oversized for most houses. The smallest furnace on its lowest setting is still too big for an average house in Ontario, in Toronto, and heat pumps fit that better, right? So you get that comfort for more of the year, and especially for the shoulder seasons. When thinking about sizing air conditioners versus heat pumps, the quick and easiest way would just be like, it will be safe to put in the same size heat pump as your existing air conditioner, as long as you haven't had sort of duct pressure issues with it. If the goal is to cover more of the heating, and sort of get that potentially more of that asterisk huge savings piece, but especially getting the more sustainability, basically leaning on the heat pump for more hours of the heating season, it's generally safe to bump up the sizing of the heat pump by half a ton or even a ton, as long as the ductwork allows for that. Talking about ducted systems, as long as the ductwork allows for that, and as long as the panel has capacity for that. So the huge saving asterisk is really a conversation about winter savings. It's heating savings, and that just comes down to fuel costs and which fuel you are currently on. So Gas gets the yellow, especially with the electricity rate increase last year. It's going to be a comparable operating cost for the year. Propane and resistance electric get a big check mark, and then oil gets a double check mark. There's huge savings there, and the rebates are also bigger for propane resistance and oil if you switch from those fuels to a heat pump. So I ran through that quickly. I hope that caused some more question, maybe caused more questions than I answered, but that's what the Q&A is for. We know what a two-way AC is, just a heat pump. Yes, they work when it's really hot outside. Are they noisier? Are they more efficient? It depends what we're comparing. It's always important to sort of do apples to apples. And then the sizing consideration, I think, is a very important piece of this. It's the finding the right size system for the house. And again, like you will be generally safe picking the same size heat pump as an AC, but there's usually room there to install a bigger heat pump to provide more of the heating throughout the year. So I squeaked in just under 20 minutes. I think I was given 15. So I'll pass it back to pass back to Nathan.
I forgive you, Drew. I forgive you. That's no problem. Thank you for getting into that and for helping me be able to spot heat pumps versus ACs. The side venting thing was not something I knew before, so I definitely appreciate that. That's something that's happened since I've started to learn about heat pumps. As I'm like walking down the street, pointing them out and be like, "Oh, which one is this?" So that's a helpful tip. Also, if it's like 10 degrees and it looks like an AC but it's running, that's probably not someone running an AC. That's probably a heat pump there. All right. You guys can see my screen okay there. Thumbs up. Fantastic. So my section is really getting into some of the advice and firsthand experience of Torontonians who have installed their heat pumps and things that they'd like to share with you to make sure you have a comfortable experience if you decide to install a heat pump for yourself as well. And I'm calling that the three C's of cooling. And the first one's going to be pretty familiar to you. But before I dive into that, just at the highest level, Toronto Home Energy Network, we're a nonprofit. We have nothing to sell you. We're just here to do informational webinars like this, produce guides, and set up community groups around the city that do things like heat pump parties, which are essentially technology demonstrations, to help you find unbiased information about heat pumps and to help you along that journey. I'll get more into our specific interventions after going through my presentation, but I just want to give you that high level context. So that first C, like I said, is going to be a little bit familiar because it's talking about comfort again. And the reason I want to start here is because there was recently a survey released by Clean Energy Canada. They went out and they talked to 3,800 heat pump owners across Canada. And through that survey, an interesting thing that popped up is more than half of people that had heat pumps talked about improved cooling and more evenly distributed cooling around their home as something that they were surprised about. They didn't really think that was going to be a big benefit for them, but it actually turns out that that's something they're telling their neighbors about and they're happy to share with these survey respondents as well. So we want to get into that, but really diving down into the Toronto context in particular. Our housing stock is a little older. I mean, the survey was people all across Canada, so let's dive into what Toronto means. And to do that, I'm going to pull up some quotations from one of these homeowners I've been talking about. Her name's Nicole. She lives downtown. And she installed a heat pump a couple years ago. But before, she was a little bit worried about it. She had a heat pump, but on her upper floors, heating was no problem, but the upper floors of her home almost never got cool enough. She put it exactly this way. The upstairs remained stifling, but the main floor was like a refrigerator. Obviously, that is not a very comfortable situation, and we're going to dive into how Nicole was able to fix that to make sure if you decide to go for a heat pump that you're not in that situation as well. So the first piece of that is actually just going to be for people that have ductwork in their homes, and I won't dwell there because I also have comfort pieces that are relevant to any homeowner. But just for this quick 2, 3 minutes here, I want the people with ducted systems to lean in because this bit's for you. So I've pulled up this photo here of someone watering their garden. And the reason for that is It's a good analogy for how the heat pump works in your house. So say you're out in your garden, you're trying to water, and you turn on the faucet, everything seems fine there, and you go to the end of the hose, and the water is barely dribbling out, nothing's really happening, but you know the water source is fine, and you check and you look down. There's a big crack, there's a big hole in the hose, no problem. You have to patch that up, repair it, and everything's back to normal. In this analogy, the water source is the heat pump, and your hose is the ductwork. The ductwork is actually moving that beautiful conditioned air around your house. But the reason I'm focusing on it is because a lot of homeowners don't appreciate that. Like a roof, like a driveway, like your kitchen, ductwork can degrade over time, and the performance of it can go down over time. So that means your heat pump actually has to work harder because the vanes, the hose is not moving the conditioned air where it's meant to be. So these small holes can get bigger and bigger over time. And as it turns out in Nicole's situation, that was exactly the problem that was leading to the cooling not getting to the second floor. So let's dive into those things that I want you to think about. If you have a ducted system and you're installing a heat pump, things to talk to your installer about to make sure they're thinking about your ducts and ensuring that hose isn't leaky and the air is getting where it needs to get to. So there's kind of three main things to make sure your ducts are performing properly. The first is the volume. Another way of saying that is, are they big enough to actually move the air around the house? In the hose analogy, if you had a tiny hose and a huge blast of water, nothing's going to come out the end either, right? So we want to make sure that that volume is big enough to actually work with the ducts, and these are measurements that installers can do. The second piece is a little bit more technical, but I've got another analogy ready to go. Uh, can you test the static pressure of my ducts? So static pressure, what does that mean? It's very similar to blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure, your heart has to work really hard to force your blood through the clogged arteries to where it needs to go. Similarly, with a heat pump, if the static pressure is too high, that means it can't move the air through the ducts in a clean and efficient way. So the motor has to speed up faster and faster to try to force it through that high pressure area. And that wears down your motor faster, just like high blood pressure wears down your heart faster. So again, that's something that an installer can check before they put it in. And it's something that can be adjusted without having to like rip out all the ducts and replace things. So it's not this massive $30,000 project. It's some minor fixes can go a long way to ensuring your static pressure is correct. And the last thing I want you to keep in mind is, like I said, gaps, cracks, and breaks can happen in ductwork, just like a garden hose. And there's something called aero sealing or duct sealing that can patch up those holes and cracks and make sure the conditioned air from your heat pump is getting where it needs to go. And I'll pull up Nicole again. That is exactly what Nicole had to do. And not only was there gaps and cracks, but one whole section of her ductwork had come out of the wall. So what was happening is the AC was making that cool air and it would get to that section and just all leak out into the walls. And so it wasn't getting there. So there's nothing wrong with her AC exactly. It was the hose, the ductwork that was the issue. So it's something to keep in mind for the people with ducts. Okay, ductless people can come back into the conversation now. Well, this one is going to be more about that comfort piece that's relevant for any home across Canada. Air sealing and insulation, that is to say, having a not very drafty home, having a well-sealed home, and having a well-insulated home. We talk about a lot in the context of the winter because the analogy people use for insulation is like, put a nice sweater around your home and it'll keep you cozy. But the reality is, air sealing, not having drafts and insulation, pays off in the summer too, because you're not going to have that cool air escaping away, right? So this is something I want you to keep in mind, and these are hierarchical as well. Things like air sealing is a great place to start because it's cheap and effective. And it's, again, one of these home maintenance things that people were just kind of trained to think that a drafty home is a drafty home and it sucks, but it's old. And what can you do? You can do a lot. You can actually get a lot of sealing done. I have to do this in my old apartment. It's 1910s. I have to put little weather stripping between the windows, and that helps a ton, both in the cooling and the heating season. And this can be done DIY, or you can bring in a company to do it for $1,000, $2,000. It's very cheap. If you decide to get insulation, do it strategically. Attic and basements are priority areas, and we really recommend doing an energy assessment. That's when an energy advisor comes to your home and they do some measurements because they can tell you, how much and where is going to be the right amount of insulation you need. That's a good place to start rather than calling up insulation companies because, they're going to tell you need a lot of insulation. So it's nice to get that kind of unbiased perspective if you're going to go into a project like that. Okay. And the last comfort piece Drew talked a lot about, so I'm going to move through this quickly. It's just saying, some heat pumps are quieter than traditional ACs, but not all of them. So it is something if you're out on a patio and your heat pump outdoor unit or your AC outdoor unit is there, or on the front porch, or on the side of your house next to your neighbor's bedroom window. It's nice to think about having a quieter system, both for your peace of mind, for your neighbor's peace of mind, but also getting your patio back. I know I have to shout over my parents' AC in their backyard, so it's a nice thing to have a system that's quiet and just purring in the background. So with that, I'll move on to the second C. We've talked a little bit about it, and that's the cost piece again. And the reason I want to revisit it is in that same heat pump owner survey, more than half of respondents talked about their energy bills being lower. And Drew kind of got into some of the reasons, if you have baseboards or propane, it's a home run. That's no problem at all, guaranteed cost savings. In Toronto with natural gas, it's a little bit trickier. So to get to the bottom of this question, we reached out to a bunch of homeowners and we were able to get 10 people's energy bills who had switched to heat pumps. So we looked at their year of energy use bills before they had a heat pump and then their energy bills after they got a heat pump. And we dove into the findings and we're able to tell you about them now. So let's get into like what we actually found there. And it's a big drum roll here. It depends. I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you it's a home run, but it's very much depends on your home. So what did we actually find? Most homes were replacing very old air conditioners with heat pumps, so they were seeing some summer savings. 50 to 200 bucks. It's nice. It's not, again, a huge home run, but it's nice to know replacing an old AC with a convention or a cold climate heat pump, you're going to see some summer savings. Across the whole year, half the homes in our cohort save some money, half of the homes in our cohort have their utility bills increase, which is scary, but let me get into what I actually mean by that, because of course you would want to say, oh, I'm signing up for a heat pump, my bills are going to go up. That's not what I signed up for. Let's get into what we actually found there. Over the whole year, between all those houses that had an average increase, you're talking $276, not a backbreaking amount, and this is like great. This is smaller than the difference if you were to have a warm winter versus a really cold winter like we had. So in the context again of your total spending across the whole year, this $270 is not a huge increase. It's not a backbreaking increase. And the comfort benefits, most people are happy to take on, 200 bucks for a much more comfortable home. So that's what we were finding there. On the savings side, the people that were able to save money were actually saving more than the people who found increases in their bills, around $423 there. We're seeing on the average of the homes that were able to save money. So we're in the process now of diving into that and why that's going to happen. And we'll have an update coming out in our newsletter, which we'll link in the chat later. But some high level hypotheses. Again, this is a set of 10 homes, so we're not going to make sweeping conclusions here. But most of these people did other upgrades, things like air sealing or replacing old water heaters, updating them, adding heat pump water heaters, for example. So we're finding in that case that combined with other home updates, these are better ways to reduce your bills. Usually, if you're replacing really old water heater or really old furnace, that's when you're going to see the bills come up because as equipment ages, it gets less efficient. So that's something to keep in mind with the cost piece there. I just have one more piece on cost, and then I'll flip to the last C and talk a little bit more about the work we do, and then we'll open it up for Q&A there. So the last bit about cost is that there are rebates for heat pumps. Their cold climate heat pumps are the ones that are eligible. There's an older generation of non-cold climate heat pumps. Those aren't included in the main rebate and incentive program for Ontario, which is the Home Renovation Savings Program. So you really want to look out for those cold climate heat pumps. And through that program, we're finding people are getting, between $1,000 and $2,250 back on their heat pumps. And the intent of that is to make the price of a heat pump break even with a mid to high end air conditioner. So the home renovation savings program is really built so that you can get this more efficient, more comfortable technology in your home and you don't have to settle for the air conditioner there. And there's also, through the home renovation savings program, money back on air sealing, insulation, heat pump water heaters, lots of different stuff. So if you want to get into the weeds of that, we did do a webinar at the beginning of March on this, where we had a program advisor from the Home Renovation Savings Program come in and talk to us all about it. So I asked Jake to drop the webinar recording link in there so you guys can bookmark it. And if you're at that point in your research journey, you can check out our great conversation with Delish that we had at the start of March. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is just that climate bit. So typically, if you're installing a heat pump to replace an old air conditioner, it's going to connect to your existing gas furnace. And Drew had those great diagrams to show that it doesn't look much different from what you're having now. But the key piece to dive into with the climate aspect here is that heating buildings with fossil fuels, with natural gas, is the number one source of carbon pollution in Toronto. It's not cars. Cars people drive for, 2, 3 hours a day. But in the winter, you're heating your home 24 hours a day, every day. Your home has a tailpipe just like a car has a tailpipe. And the great thing with cold climate heat pumps is you can dramatically reduce the amount of time your gas furnace needs to run. And when that gas furnace dies, if you get a really good cold climate heat pump, you don't even have to replace that furnace, and the cold climate heat pump can potentially take over for that. That's something you should talk to your installer about. There's lots of homes that are fully electric and don't have gas heating. Again, that's a good question to have with the installer because there's some pieces to make sure that the heat pump is up for that and adding electric backup heating and all these things. But in that look across the 10 homes we did to understand cost savings, we also measured the amount of carbon reduction that they were having in their homes. We're seeing 1 to 3 metric tons of CO2 per home every year. So that's why we get a little bit excited about talking about heat pumps as a sustainability thing. So this isn't like a high level policy thing that you have to lobby and the next government comes and removes it. This is something you can do right now to dramatically reduce the carbon coming out of your home. So if you end up including that hybrid system and your heat pump's hooked up to your existing gas furnace, just make sure that your installer is setting it in a way that really uses the heat pump to its maximum and only turns on the gas furnace when it absolutely needs to. So with that, I'll ask Jake to throw in a quick second poll because we've hit you with a lot of information. So I'd love for you guys to fill in this poll, which is just asking, hey, what helps you now? What do you really want to see? And putting in some of those questions about, hey, like this is what I'm on my mind, this is the help I need, and we'd love to be able to follow up with you on that. And just to close, I'll spend 2 minutes here talking about the ways that the Toronto Home Energy Network can help you out. The two big things we do are kind of expert guidance and information and setting up grassroots communities. So I'll talk about those two things quickly. We have something called Your First Heat Pump Guidebook, which I'll ask Jake to put the link in there. It's just the network.to. It's a guidebook. It's a free guidebook for people that are new to heat pumps and just gets into all the different systems and the costs and how it fits into your home as as a system as well. So this is a really one-stop shop for understanding heat pumps with some articles and videos that link out from there. And it's a very helpful resource. So I'd really love you guys to give that some downloads as well. And the online support is something called the Home Retrofit Forum on Facebook. And there's that Nicole comment again. So Nicole was active in the Home Retrofit Forum. This is a great spot if you're stuck on a single question and you're not sure where to get answers. The Home Retrofit Forum is bursting with firsthand experience with heat pumps and electrifying homes. Drew's sometimes in there too, and often questions get 10, 15 really, really thoughtful replies. It's one of the good, engaged, self-moderated, awesome Facebook groups. So highly recommend checking out the Home Retrofit Forum on Facebook. Again, I'll put the link in the handout we're sending out tomorrow. And one thing we do as well is parties. So I'm sorry the P got cut off in the graphic there, but one of the interventions we do are energy audit parties or heat pump parties around the city where someone that has a heat pump invites their neighbors over. They talk about their journey, how much they spent, any comfort differences that they had. And it's just a casual setting where you can get all your questions answered in one place. And we're always including invites to that in our newsletter as well. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And if Jake can throw a link in there, that'd be awesome because we have partner communities all over the city and we're growing as well. In the East End, we got the Pocket in Riverdale that are doing events downtown. We have Seton Village, Harvard Village. In the north, we got Bedford Park and Parkdale High Park and Mimico are out in the west as well. So we have a page on our website that features all those different partner communities. So we'd love if you were able to get involved in that, either to get information or if you have a heat pump to invite people over and have a great party. So thank you. Go Jays Go is a little old now. That's well, we're back in the season. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you guys for attending. Thank you to Drew for joining us as well, and to our funders, Toronto Hydro and the Atmospheric Fund. We really appreciate it. And this is a great time to open it up to questions.